Welcome to the woods. It's pouring with rain, but I'm fairly sheltered under a red cedar and a sycamore tree. Still relatively bright, but you might be able to hear the rain in the background. Hopefully it won't distract us too much. Now this video I'm going to talk about self-sufficiency. Something I'm still trying for. I'm not there yet. Something that we can all start, we can all achieve. And when I talk about self-sufficiency, I don't just mean with food, although that's relatively important. You need food, shelter, water and power to have a fairly comfortable life. So we'll touch on all of those. And then I want to discuss how you can do it as an individual, extrapolate out from that and how it can be done as a community, and then out from that again, and to see if it's possible to do it as a nation. Now during this, I'm going to use the UK as an example because that's where I live, but it could be anywhere. You could use the same principles for wherever you live. So food. How can you be self-sufficient in food? Well, you can grow your own vegetables. You can rear animals and livestock. And some of you will be saying, yes, but you're going to need a lot of room. When you're getting into livestock, probably, but let's start with the simple stuff. We can all grow a potato or potatoes. You don't need a garden, they'll grow in a bucket. You can grow salad leaves on your windowsill. Fruit trees will grow just about anywhere. So this is all stuff as an individual you realise it is possible. Most of us never get round to doing it. Yet our grandparents, most of them, would have done this as part of their everyday life. Portions of the garden would be given over to runner beans and tomatoes and potatoes. If they didn't have a large enough garden, they probably would have had an allotment. And I'll touch on that in a minute. But growing your own food really isn't that difficult. And you're never going to get to a point, probably, where you grow all of your food. But you can get to a point where you grow most of it. And that you can get to relatively quickly. As I said, I'm not 100% self-sufficient. And for the stuff I don't produce myself, I can pop to a shop and get it. So I'm not saying that you can never use modern facilities. You can. You will. But when you reach an understanding that these globalist corporations care not one hoot for us at all, that a lot of the food we purchase from these places is not very good for us, and if it is, it's got a very high price tag attached to it, you can see that it makes sense to deny them your money and grow it yourself. It does take a little bit of time, does take a little bit of effort. Don't let that put you off. We should all be thinking along those lines, that a little bit of time and a little bit of effort is probably better than a lot of money given to people who dislike you. plenty of other things you could be spending your money on. Nowadays, maybe that would be heating. And I'd laugh at it, but friends of mine are gobsmacked at the price rises in this country for gas and electricity. So let's look on to power. Can an individual be self-sufficient in power? Well, most of you will know that I live off grid and my power comes from electricity. To get that electricity, I use solar panels, and that's stored in batteries, and then I can use it in the cabin. So I'm fairly self-sufficient. There's a small outlay to buy the equipment in the first place. If you're sensible, you can recoup that within a year or two. So power for an individual is a relatively easy thing to be self-sufficient in. Much easier than most of you think. And much more important when your electricity bills are rising at the rate they are. Worth thinking about. You don't have to have a cabin in the woods to be self-sufficient in power. You could do that wherever you're living now, with the application of solar and a few batteries. So have a think on that. So how do these things work going from an individual basis, which we can see is relatively simple, to a slightly larger group, let's say a community of 100 people? Well, they don't get harder. If anything, it becomes easier. If you had a group of 100 people, the amount of land available to you, even just using gardens, is much greater. You would also have different skill sets within that 100 people. You would have someone who's very good at building raised beds. Fantastic. You'd have someone who's skilled at growing root vegetables, and someone else who was really good at growing mushrooms, and someone else who was good at growing grain crops. It's unlikely that you're going to have green fingers in all areas, but on a community level, much easier. A pool of knowledge, a pool of skills, someone to help you, and you offering your help to others. If you wanted more land with a group of 100 people, it makes the purchasing of acres of land much more accessible. You can pool your resources, buy an acre of land, turn that over to the growing of crops, be whatever they want, whatever you needed. You might want to go for 2 acres, keep some livestock, and that way you've got eggs. If you keep poultry and fowl, you might go into meat production, where you could keep pigs and lambs. And now you're talking about getting into farming, which is the next level, when you start to look at how this should work on a national level. In the 1980s, Britain produced 80% of the food it consumed. And 40 years later, with all the advances in technology and farming practices changing for the better, we actually produce much less than 50%. And this is because our agricultural policy is tied to globalism. And they don't really want any particular nation to be self-sufficient. For them, when it's all about control, it's much better to spread out where all this food is coming from, and then distribute it. The redistribution of food. Very short-sighted as a nation to think along those lines. We need to be able to feed our own people. The fact is that we could be doing that today relatively easy, but instead farmers are paid to not produce food, a ludicrous situation. They're now being encouraged to give up farming completely with cash incentives. They don't want us to be self-sufficient. They also understand that it's completely possible. It's possible for the individual and easier for a group. It's far easier for a nation. There isn't anything we can't grow here now. Years back, we were reliant on other places for a pineapple and bananas. No longer. They're completely possible to grow them here in the UK. So it's not even a matter of having to give up your avocado and start eating turnips. It's possible that we could do it relatively quickly. All we need is a slightly different way of thinking about it. And I'm going to say that the same thing goes for power. Not institutional power, but turning your lights on power. If you can see that I am pretty self-sufficient with my power needs, and I haven't got a bill, then you can understand that as a community, that could, with that 100 people, that could be made easier. You could duplicate what an individual has done each, or you can combine, and what you'd end up with is a mini power station, be it powered by solar, panels on each roof, going to a larger battery bank that could be where the power can be pulled out to each individual household. Completely doable. Is this, again, could you extrapolate out and do it on a national level without destroying the countryside, without putting wind turbines on every hill? Yes, of course we could. Would we have to tax the people to the point of starvation in order to do this? No, not at all. It was relatively cost effective for me to do it. It would be relatively cost effective for everyone to do it. If it was organised properly, which is what should be done on a national level, it would be much, much cheaper. I understand this, and I'm no brain box. But instead we have the reverse. We have people being taxed to the point of starvation. We have a country with rising costs for food and power. Their way does not work. It's a short-sighted vision for any nation, and one we could change. So self-sufficiency. If anyone wants information on how to do it as an individual, drop me a line on Telegram. We've got a chat room over there, we've got some really smart people in it. Pop over, join, ask your questions, I'll get back to you. If I don't know the answer, there'll be somebody in there who does. But we can see from just this brief chat that if it's possible for an individual to do it, it's possible for a community to do it, and if it's possible for a community, then it's possible for a nation. And the more people that do it, the easier it becomes. The real question is, why aren't we doing it? Anyway, you lot, it really is coming down. I've still got work to do. Although I think I might try and find stuff inside to do today. Take care. I'll speak to you soon. Drop me a line on Telegram if you want to know anything. And I'll catch up with you next week.